Because the PCC's inaction in relation to the McCanns was duplicated in relation to Mr. Robert Murat as well, wasn't it?
Well, what do you mean by inaction?
Well, the same. It adopted the same position, which was one of doing nothing.
It was absolutely not one of doing nothing. I don't know how many times I have to repeat this. We put ourselves at the disposal of the McCanns. We offer them our services. We say this is what we can do. We start this within 48 hours of Madeleine being kidnapped. We carry on doing this all the way through. We protect their children and the family from being harassed by media scrums when they come back to the United Kingdom. I speak twice to Dr. McCann, something I never did with anybody else, but that's
I think we're just repeating, Sir Christopher, what you've told us already.
I am repeating because it doesn't seem to be sinking in, Mr. J. That's why.
Did you carry out, or did the PCC rather, carry out an inquiry after all of this to see whether there were clear and systematic failings by the press in their handling of the whole McCann story, by which I'm including not just the McCanns, but Mr. Robert Murat and the 8 friends of the McCanns who also secured substantial libel damages?
No, that wasn't necessary because it had become wholly clear from the court proceedings exactly what had happened. That they had, in fact, under pressure, maybe commercial pressure, taken as read information that was being provided in Praia da Luz, which hadn't been properly checked. It was as clear as a bell.
Because paragraph 539 of the DCMS Committee's report of February 2010 says precisely that in cases where there have been clear and systematic failings by the press, the PCC should not use court proceedings as a reason not to launch its own inquiry. If ever there were a case which cried out for such an inquiry, it was this case, wasn't it?
No, I think it was not a case that called for an inquiry. If ever there was a case that was obvious in the way in which newspapers had got it wrong, it was the McCann's case. I have to say, and you may think this is a feeble excuse, I never read the recommendations of that report because I had already left the PCC a year previously. So you're actually telling me something of which I was unaware. But it was screamingly obvious what had gone wrong. I could go through it again, but you don't like me repeating these things.
I'm not sure. What had gone wrong? Not from the point of view of what the PCC did or did not do, but from the point of view of the culture, practice and ethics of the press. What had gone wrong in relation to the McCann saga, if I can so describe it?
Well, I think there were a number of component parts that created a kind of toxic brew. The poor McCanns, I cannot think of a worse position to find yourself in if it had happened to me, and I don't know what I would have done. They needed the press for publicity's sake. And by God, I would have done exactly the same thing. I really would. But in those circumstances, it was a Faustian bargain, and you could see why. Where the press had become obsessed, not only the press in Britain, it was almost a global thing. How do you keep the story going? So, and then the Portuguese police was leaking like sieves. There were all kinds of rumours. You could see journalists under pressure out there in Praia da Luz being pressed by their news desks to provide fresh copy. And so they start taking risks which they shouldn't have taken. It doesn't need a big inquiry or a systematic review to see this. It is something that happens from time to time. And in this case, it led to the McCanns being accused of something which is utterly abominable.